Washington, November 8, 2024. The Federal Reserve Victoria Matthews adjusted her simple black blazer as she walked through the bustling terminal of Chicago O'Hare International Airport. Her natural hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she carried only a small leather handbag and a slim laptop case. After 18 hours of back-to-back meetings with potential investors, she looked forward to the quiet comfort of her first-class seat on the evening flight to Atlanta. At 42, Victoria had built Skywing Airlines from a small regional carrier into one of the fastest-growing airlines in the country. But today, dressed down in her travel clothes and without her usual entourage of assistants, she looked like any other business traveler heading home after a long day. The gate area was crowded with passengers waiting to board Flight 447. Victoria found a quiet corner and pulled out her phone to check messages from her executive team. The airline's stock had closed up 3%, and the new route expansion was ahead of schedule. She smiled slightly, remembering how investors had initially dismissed her vision of an airline that prioritized both luxury and accessibility. First-class passengers and our platinum members may now board, announced the gate agent. A young woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a practiced smile, Victoria gathered her belongings and joined the small line of first-class passengers. She handed her phone to the gate agent, who scanned the boarding pass displayed on the screen. "Ma'am, I think there's been a mistake," the agent said, her smile faltering slightly. "This shows seat 2A, but that's in first class." "Yes, that's correct," Victoria replied calmly. The agent, whose name tag read Jessica, looked Victoria up and down with barely concealed skepticism. "Are you sure you didn't mean to book economy? First-class tickets are quite expensive." Victoria felt a familiar tightness in her chest but kept her voice level. "Uncertain. That's my seat." Jessica turned to her colleague, an older man with graying hair. "Mike, can you check this? The system might have made an error." Mike took Victoria's phone and examined the boarding pass more closely. His expression shifted to one of mild annoyance. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see a physical boarding pass or some form of ID. These mobile passes can be easily manipulated." "Manipulated?" Victoria's eyebrows rose. "Are you suggesting I'm trying to board with a fake ticket?" "I'm not suggesting anything," Mike replied curtly. "I'm just following protocol. We need to verify that this ticket was legitimately purchased." Victoria reached into her handbag and produced her driver's license. Mike examined it carefully, comparing the name to the boarding pass. His frown deepened. "The names match, but I'm still concerned about how this ticket was obtained. First-class seats cost over $2,000 for this route. Are you traveling on a company account?" "Something like that," Victoria said. Her patience beginning to wear thin, Jessica whispered something to Mike, who nodded gravely. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to step aside while we verify your ticket with our supervisor. There have been issues recently with fraudulent bookings." Victoria felt the eyes of other passengers on her as she was directed to a small area beside the gate desk. The first-class passengers who had been behind her in line were waved through without question, all of them white, all of them apparently above suspicion. A few minutes later, a supervisor approached. Patricia Williams was a stern-looking woman in her 50s who carried herself with the authority of someone accustomed to making quick decisions. "I understand there's an issue with your ticket," Patricia said without preamble. "The only issue is that your staff seems unable to believe that I belong in first class," Victoria replied. Patricia's expression hardened. "Ma'am, I don't appreciate that tone. We're simply doing our job. Now, can you explain how you came to have this ticket?" Victoria took a deep breath. She could reveal her identity and end this humiliation immediately, but part of her needed to see how far this would go. She needed to understand what other passengers might be experiencing. "I purchased it through the airline's website," she said truthfully. "Using whose credit card?" Patricia pressed, "My own." "And what do you do for work that allows you to afford first-class travel?" Victoria stared at the supervisor for a long moment. "I don't believe my profession is relevant to my ability to board this aircraft." Patricia's face reddened. Look, lady, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Either you can cooperate with our security procedures, or we can involve airport security. I've seen this before. People buy tickets they can't afford, thinking they can somehow talk their way out of paying, or they use stolen credit cards. We're trying to give you a chance to resolve this quietly. Are you accusing me of credit card fraud? Victoria's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath it. I'm not accusing you of anything yet, but your evasive answers are raising red flags. Now I'll ask one more time. How did you pay for this ticket? The boarding area had grown quieter as other passengers paused their conversations to watch the drama unfold. Victoria noticed several people holding up their phones, apparently recording the interaction. I paid for it with my American Express black card, Victoria said clearly. Patricia scoffed. Right, an Amex black card, those are invitation only, and they require spending hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. Do you mind if I ask what you do for a living? I work in the airline industry, Victoria replied. Doing what? Baggage handling? Customer service? The casual dismissiveness in Patricia's tone sparked something in Victoria. Is there a problem with those professions? Of course not, Patricia backtracked quickly. I just meant that those positions typically don't pay enough for first-class travel and exclusive credit cards. Victoria pulled out her wallet and produced the black card. Patricia examined it suspiciously as if it might be counterfeit. This could be fake, she muttered. Then verify it, Victoria challenged. Patricia hesitated, then pulled out her phone and made a call to what Victoria assumed was the airline security office. She spoke in hushed tones, occasionally glancing back at Victoria with growing irritation. After several minutes, Patricia returned with a security guard in tow. The guard was a large man with a no-nonsense expression who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us, Patricia announced loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear clearly. Excuse me? Victoria stood straighter. There are irregularities with your ticket purchase that need to be investigated. Until we can verify your identity and the legitimacy of your payment method, you cannot board this aircraft. Victoria looked around at the crowd of passengers, many of whom were now openly staring and recording. She thought about the dozens of similar stories she'd heard from other successful black professionals, the assumptions, the extra scrutiny, the constant need to prove they belonged in spaces they had every right to occupy. And if I refuse to go with you? She asked. Then we'll have airport police escort you out, Patricia replied firmly. And you'll be banned from flying with Skywing Airlines. The irony of that threat wasn't lost on Victoria, but she kept her expression neutral. I see. The security guard stepped forward. Ma'am, please come with us quietly. We just need to sort this out. Victoria gathered her belongings, her mind racing. She could end this charade with a single phone call, but she was curious to see exactly how her own airline's employees would treat a passenger they deemed suspicious based solely on the color of her skin. As she followed the security guard and Patricia away from the gate, she heard murmurs from the crowd behind her. Some passengers seemed uncomfortable with what they'd witnessed, while others appeared satisfied that the disruption was being handled. They led her through a series of corridors to a small security office near the gate area. The room was sterile and unwelcoming, with fluorescent lighting that cast harsh shadows on the gray walls. There were 2 chairs, a metal desk, and a computer terminal. Patricia took the seat behind the desk, while the security guard positioned himself near the door. Victoria was left standing, a deliberate power play that wasn't lost on her. Now then, Patricia began, pulling out a form. Let's start from the beginning. Full name? Victoria Elena Matthews. Address? Victoria provided her address in Atlanta's exclusive Buckhead neighborhood. Occupation? I already told you I work in the airline industry. Patricia's pen hovered over the paper. I need specifics. Job title, company name. Victoria considered her options. She could continue this charade and see exactly how far her employees would take their discriminatory behavior, or she could end it now. The decision was made for her when Patricia's radio crackled to life. Patricia, we need an update on the situation with the passenger. The flight is scheduled to depart in 20 minutes. Patricia picked up the radio. Still investigating. The passenger is being uncooperative. What exactly am I being uncooperative about? Victoria interjected. I've answered every question you've asked. You haven't explained how someone in your position can afford a first-class ticket. And what position is that? Victoria asked pointedly. Patricia waved her hand dismissively. Look, we both know what this is about. You paused the benchmark interest rate by 0.25%, marking its fourth increase this year to combat high inflation. The Fed chair stated this measure aims to control rising prices and support economic stability. Victoria sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair, watching Patricia type notes into her computer with aggressive keystrokes. The security guard, whose name tag read David, remained stationed by the door like a sentinel. 20 minutes had passed since they'd brought her to this sterile room, and the flight she was supposed to be on had already begun boarding its final passengers. The credit card company confirms that the card is legitimate and the charge went through, Patricia said, looking up from her screen with obvious disappointment. But that doesn't explain how you got access to someone else's card. Because it's my card, Victoria replied for the third time. Ma'am, American Express black cards aren't just handed out to anyone. The annual fee alone is $5,000, and you need an invitation based on substantial spending with the company. What's your annual income? Victoria crossed her legs and leaned back in the chair. I don't believe that's any of your business. Patricia slammed her hand on the desk. Everything about this situation is my business. You're trying to board my aircraft with a ticket that you clearly cannot afford, using a credit card that you shouldn't have access to, and refusing to explain how any of this is possible. Your aircraft? Victoria raised an eyebrow. You know what I mean. I'm responsible for the security of this flight, and that includes making sure people are who they claim to be. David shifted uncomfortably near the door. Patricia, maybe we should just let her board. The card cleared, and she has valid identification. Patricia shot him a withering look. David, you don't understand how sophisticated these scams can be. Identity theft, stolen cards, fake documentation, it's all possible. We can't just take everything at face value. Victoria's phone buzzed with notifications, but Patricia had insisted it remain face down on the desk. She could see the screen lighting up repeatedly and knew her assistant, Sarah, was probably wondering why she hadn't checked in. Can I ask you something? Victoria said, her voice calm despite her growing frustration. In your 15 years of experience, how many first-class passengers have you subjected to this level of scrutiny? I investigate any passenger whose documentation raises red flags. And how many of those passengers have been black women traveling alone? Patricia's eyes narrowed. Race has nothing to do with this, doesn't it? Because I've been watching your gate operations for the past hour. You waved through 3 white passengers without checking their identification, including one gentleman who was wearing gym clothes and flip-flops. But somehow my business attire and valid documentation raised red flags. That's completely different. Patricia protested. Those passengers were clearly frequent travelers. They had the right ... bearing? Victoria repeated. What exactly does that mean? Patricia stumbled over her words. They looked like they belonged there. They had the confidence, the accessories, the whole package. Victoria pulled her phone closer despite Patricia's earlier directive. I'd like to call my lawyer now. Absolutely not, Patricia snapped. We're not at that point yet. What point exactly are we at? Because from where I sit, you've detained a paying passenger for over half an hour based on nothing more than your personal judgment about whether I look like I belong in first class. David cleared his throat. Patricia, the flight is about to close its doors. If we're going to resolve this, we need to do it quickly. Patricia's radio crackled again. Security office, this is gate 34. We need status on the delayed passenger. Departure is in 5 minutes. Patricia grabbed the radio. Still investigating. Prepare to depart without her. Victoria felt a surge of anger. She had built this airline from the ground up, worked 18-hour days to make it profitable. And now her own employees were so blinded by their prejudices that they were willing to prevent her from boarding. "That's my flight," Victoria said quietly. "Not anymore, it isn't," Patricia replied smugly. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before trying to scam your way into first class." "Scam?" Victoria's voice rose for the first time. "You think this is all some elaborate scam? To get what, exactly? One first-class seat? Do you have any idea how ridiculous that sounds?" "People do crazy things for status," Patricia said with a shrug. "Maybe you wanted to impress someone, or maybe you just wanted to see what it was like. Either way, it ends here." Victoria stood up abruptly, causing David to tense by the door. "I want to speak with your supervisor. I am the supervisor for this shift." "Then I want to speak with the airport police. Since you seem determined to treat me like a criminal, let's make it official." Patricia hesitated for the first time since this ordeal began. "That's really not necessary." "Oh, but I think it is. You've accused me of fraud, detained me against my will, and denied me access to a flight I legitimately purchased. I think the police should definitely hear about this." David looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Maybe we should just—" "David, go back to your station," Patricia commanded. "I'll handle this." But Victoria was already moving toward the door. "Actually, David, I think you should stay. You're a witness to everything that's happened here." Patricia jumped up and moved to block Victoria's path to the door. "You're not leaving until we sort this out? Are you physically restraining me now?" Victoria asked, pulling out her phone. "Because that would be false imprisonment, which is a felony in Illinois." "Put the phone away," Patricia demanded. Victoria activated the camera function and began recording. "State your name and position with the airline, please." "Turn that off immediately." "Patricia Williams, shift supervisor," Victoria said to the camera. "You've just detained me for over 30 minutes because you don't believe I can afford a first-class ticket. Is that correct?" Patricia lunged for the phone, but Victoria stepped back quickly. "Don't touch me or my property." David moved between them. "Ladies, let's all calm down here." Victoria kept the camera rolling. "David, can you tell me what you've witnessed in the past half hour?" I don't think I should. Did you see?" Patricia questioned any other first-class passengers about their ability to afford their tickets. David glanced nervously at Patricia, then back at Victoria. "Well, no, but did you see her examine anyone else's credit card or demand proof of their income?" "Ma'am, I really can't—" Victoria's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. "I need to take this call," Victoria said. "No phone calls?" Patricia insisted, but her voice had lost some of its earlier authority. Victoria answered the call anyway. "Sarah?" "Miss Matthews, I've been trying to reach you. Your flight shows as departed, but you're not listed as having boarded. Is everything okay?" Patricia's eyes widened at the formal way Victoria was being addressed. "I'm fine." "Sarah, I'm currently being detained by airport security because they don't believe I can afford my ticket." "I'm sorry, what?" Sarah's voice was loud enough for the others to hear. "Who's detaining you?" "Patricia Williams, a shift supervisor here at O'Hare." "I'll have someone from legal there in 20 minutes, Sarah said immediately. "That won't be necessary," Victoria replied, watching Patricia's growing confusion. "But please do contact Michael Chun and let him know what's happening. I think he'll find this very interesting." Michael Chun was Skywing's CEO of Customer Experience, and Patricia's face went pale at the mention of his name. "Wait," Patricia said slowly. "How do you know Michael Chun?" Victoria ended the call and looked at Patricia with a slight smile. "I work in the airline industry, remember?" "You said you work in customer service or baggage handling," Patricia stammered. "Actually, I said I work in the airline industry." "You assumed the rest." David looked confused. "Who's Michael Chun?" He's... Patricia swallowed hard. "He's one of the top executives at Skywing Airlines." Victoria's phone rang again. This time it was Michael Chun himself. "Victoria?" "Sarah told me what's happening." "Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Michael. Just getting a first-hand look at our customer service procedures." Patricia grabbed the edge of the desk for support. "Do you need me to intervene?" Michael asked. Not yet. I'm learning quite a bit about how our employees treat certain passengers. It's been very enlightening. I'll be in the office first thing tomorrow morning. We need to discuss this immediately. Yes, we do, Victoria agreed. Her eyes fixed on Patricia's increasingly ashen face. After ending the call, Victoria turned back to Patricia. Now, where were we? Oh yes, you were explaining how you can tell who belongs in first class just by looking at them. Patricia's voice came out as barely a whisper. Who? Who are you? I'm exactly who I've been telling you I am. Victoria Matthews. A passenger who purchased a first-class ticket and expected to be treated with the same respect as every other paying customer. David was looking back and forth between them like he was watching a tennis match. I don't understand what's happening. What's happening? Victoria said, her voice growing stronger. Is that your colleague Patricia has just demonstrated exactly why Skywing Airlines needs better diversity training and a complete overhaul of its customer service protocols? Patricia sank into her chair. You work for the airline? I told you that from the beginning, but not in customer service. No, not in customer service. Patricia's hands were visibly shaking now. What's your position? Victoria looked at her watch. Her original flight had departed 10 minutes ago, and she had a board meeting. Victoria arrived at Skywing Airlines Atlanta headquarters the next morning at 7:30 sharp. The 40-story glass tower gleamed in the early morning sunlight, its modern facade reflecting the growing city skyline around it. She had taken the red-eye flight on a competitor's airline, spending the journey drafting notes about the systemic changes that would need to be implemented immediately. Her assistant Sarah was waiting in the executive lobby with a steaming cup of coffee and a stack of reports. The legal team has reviewed the security footage from O'Hare, Sarah said as they stepped into Victoria's private elevator. There are also 17 different cell phone videos from passengers that were posted on social media overnight. Victoria accepted the coffee gratefully. How bad is it? Viral, Sarah replied grimly. The hashtag Skywing shame is trending, and our stock price opened down 4% this morning. Victoria's jaw tightened. She had built this company with a commitment to fairness and equality, only to discover that her own employees were perpetuating exactly the kind of discrimination she had fought against her entire career. The elevator opened directly into the executive floor, where Victoria's corner office commanded a panoramic view of the city. The space was tastefully decorated with aviation memorabilia and awards recognizing Skywing's achievements in customer service and diversity initiatives. The irony wasn't lost on her. Brief me on Patricia Williams and David Rodriguez, Victoria said, settling behind her mahogany desk. Sarah consulted her tablet. Patricia Williams, 15 years with the company, supervisor for the past 6. Performance reviews have been consistently positive. David Rodriguez, 3 years, generally well regarded by his peers. No previous complaints of discriminatory behavior on file for either employee. That's about to change, Victoria muttered. Her intercom buzzed. Miss Matthews, Michael Chun, and the entire senior leadership team are here for the emergency meeting. Send them in. The conference room adjacent to Victoria's office quickly filled with familiar faces. Michael Chung, Chief of Customer Experience, looked visibly shaken. Rebecca Thompson, Chief Operating Officer, carried a thick folder of incident reports. David Kim, General Counsel, had his laptop open to what appeared to be legal documents. James Rodriguez, Chief Financial Officer, kept glancing at his phone, presumably monitoring the stock price. Before we begin, Victoria said, I want everyone to watch something. Sarah connected her laptop to the large wall monitor, and suddenly Patricia Williams filled the screen. The cell phone video quality was surprisingly clear, capturing every moment of the confrontation from the previous evening. The room watched in stunned silence as Patricia questioned Victoria's ability to afford her ticket, demanded to see her credit cards, and eventually had her removed from the gate area. The audio picked up every condescending comment, every assumption, every moment of escalating discrimination. When the video ended, the conference room remained silent for a long moment. Jesus, Michael whispered. Rebecca was the first to speak. Victoria, I am so sorry. This is absolutely unacceptable. Sorry isn't going to fix this, Victoria replied calmly. We have a systemic problem that goes far deeper than one supervisor having a bad night. This incident reveals fundamental failures in our training, our oversight, and our company culture. David Kim leaned forward. We need to move quickly on damage control. The media attention is already significant, and it's only going to grow. We're not doing damage control, Victoria said firmly. We're doing damage acknowledgement. We're going to admit that we failed, take responsibility, and implement immediate changes to ensure this never happens again. James Rodriguez looked up from his phone. The board is going to want answers. How do we explain that our own CEO was discriminated against by our own employees? By telling the truth, Victoria replied. That unconscious bias exists throughout our industry, and we've been naive to think we were immune to it. Michael was still staring at the now blank monitor. I keep thinking about all the passengers this has probably happened to who don't have your resources or platform. How many people have we failed without ever knowing it? That's exactly what we need to find out, Victoria said. Rebecca, I want you to conduct a comprehensive review of all passenger complaints related to discrimination over the past 5 years. Look for patterns, common factors, anything that suggests this was part of a larger problem. Rebecca nodded grimly. Already on it. Victoria's assistant knocked and entered. Excuse me, but there are reporters gathering outside the building, and we've received interview requests from CNN, NBC, and the Washington Post. Schedule a press conference for this afternoon, Victoria decided. Full disclosure, complete transparency. David Kim looked concerned. Victoria, I strongly advise against making any public statements until we've had time to prepare a legal strategy. David, I appreciate your concern, but this isn't a legal problem. It's a leadership problem. And leaders take responsibility. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Victoria glanced at it and felt her anger rise again. What is it? Michael asked, noticing her expression. It's from Patricia Williams. She's asking if we can work something out quietly. Victoria set the phone down harder than necessary. She still doesn't understand that this isn't about her job. It's about the hundreds of passengers who've been subjected to the same treatment. Sarah appeared in the doorway again. The HR director is here with the employment files you requested. Martha Hendricks, Skywing's HR director for the past 8 years, entered carrying 2 thick personnel folders. She looked like she hadn't slept. Patricia Williams and David Rodriguez, Martha said, setting the files on the conference table. I've also pulled the training records for all customer-facing employees at O'Hare. Victoria opened Patricia's file and scanned the performance evaluations. 15 years of positive reviews. No mention of any issues with bias or discrimination. How is that possible? Martha shifted uncomfortably. Our evaluation system focuses primarily on efficiency metrics and customer satisfaction scores. We don't specifically assess for discriminatory behavior. We do now, Victoria said decisively. Draft new evaluation criteria that include specific assessments of bias and cultural sensitivity. And I want mandatory unconscious bias training for every single employee, starting with management. Rebecca was taking notes furiously. What about Patricia and David? They're both asking to speak with you directly. Victoria considered this. Set up individual meetings for this afternoon after the press conference. But make it clear that this isn't a negotiation. The morning flew by in a blur of meetings, planning sessions, and crisis management. Victoria personally called the family members of both employees to inform them of the investigation, demonstrating the level of seriousness with which she was treating the situation. At 2 o'clock, Victoria stood before a packed press room in Skywing's headquarters. Cameras flashed as she approached the podium, her expression serious but determined. Yesterday evening, I was discriminated against by my own employees while trying to board a Skywing Airlines flight, she began without preamble. I was questioned about my ability to afford my ticket, subjected to additional scrutiny not applied to other passengers. and ultimately prevented from boarding my flight. This happened because I am a black woman, and my employees made assumptions about my financial status and right to be in first class based on the color of my skin. The room erupted with questions, but Victoria held up her hand for quiet. I want to be clear about something. This is not about one supervisor having a bad day. This is about systemic biases that exist throughout the airline industry and apparently within my own company. I take full responsibility for creating a culture where this kind of discrimination was possible. She paused to let that sink in. Effective immediately, Skywing Airlines is implementing a comprehensive anti-discrimination program. Every employee will undergo bias training. Our customer service protocols are being completely revised. We're establishing an independent review board to investigate discrimination complaints. And we're partnering with civil rights organizations to ensure our policies reflect best practices in the industry. A reporter from CNN raised her hand. Miss Matthews, what's happening to the employees involved? Patricia Williams has been terminated immediately. David Rodriguez is suspended pending a full investigation. But let me be clear, firing one supervisor doesn't solve the underlying problem. We need to examine how our hiring, training, and promotion practices may have contributed to this situation. Another reporter called out, "Do you plan to take legal action?" Victoria shook her head. This isn't about legal action. It's about moral action. It's about ensuring that every passenger who chooses to fly with us is treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their race, gender, age, or perceived economic status. The questions continued for another 20 minutes before Victoria concluded the press conference and returned to her office. She had one more difficult task ahead of her at 4 o'clock. Patricia Williams arrived at Skywing headquarters accompanied by a union representative. She looked exhausted and defeated, a stark contrast to the confident supervisor who had detained Victoria less than 24 hours earlier. Victoria met them in a small conference room. With Mar,